Here we are again. Dear cultured and knowledgeable audience who still have the courage or the masochistic habit of tuning in to watch, what new outrage does this blessed political class have in store for us, which governs the country richest in natural resources and paradoxically is run by the most creatively corrupt people in the Western Hemisphere? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mexico, land of sleeping volcanoes, aged tequila, and rulers who never sleep because they're too busy figuring out how to divide up the money that belongs to all of us. Today, I bring you a menu that, if it weren't completely real, would seem like the script of a narco novela written by someone who deeply hates this country. But no, this is Mexico in the year of our Lord 2026 with Claudia Sheinbaum in the presidency, with Congress functioning like a small town bar and with fuel tax fraud as the common thread connecting the entire political family of the Fourth Transformation, with what you already know is called, even if they don't want to admit it, even on their deathbed, organized crime. Hold on, because things are getting interesting. Let's get to it. Every moderately informed citizen should be asking themselves one key question this week. How is it possible that in the most important legislative chamber in the country, the place where supposedly the future of 130 million Mexicans is debated, the headlines are dominated by two representatives who decided to settle their differences the old-fashioned way, in other words, with fists? Because that's exactly what happened in San Lázaro. Representatives Senyasa and Escobar and Carlos Mancilla, two luminaries of national political thought, two heroes of participatory democracy, two representatives of the sovereign people of Mexico, got into a brawl that would have been unacceptable even in the filthiest bar in any town in the country, but had the privilege of happening no less than in the Chamber of Deputies of the Honorable Congress of the Union. I mean, they didn't actually come to blows. But anyway, let that be clear for the record. Meanwhile, these two gentlemen were busy showing each other their hand-to-hand combat skills. Their fellow caucus members, with the efficiency of people who've spent years perfecting the art of getting things through without anyone noticing, took advantage of the distraction to pass the reforms that President Claudia Sheinbaum needed. Coincidence? Please. In Mexico, when two deputies fight right at the moment important reforms are being voted on, that's not called coincidence. That's called political maneuvering. And if you still believe in the coincidences of the Fourth Transformation, you probably also believe in the Tooth Fairy and that the Maya train will make a profit. Let's be precise and let's be fair, because here we're not chairos or fifis. We're people who read, who think, and who get outraged by information. Oh. The reforms approved in that barroom atmosphere are not a minor detail. They are part of the legislative agenda of a president who inherited the complete manual from her boss, the old Juango, that man from Tabasco who went to his ranch to write his memoirs and collect royalties for books that nobody reads, and who is carrying it out with an efficiency that, if applied to something useful like public security or the economy, would be worthy of admiration. But no, Morena's efficiency is not applied to solving the thousands of homicides each year. It's not applied to building hospitals that actually work. It's not applied to fighting corruption, which, according to them, they already eradicated from the very first day of their government, as if by Republican magic. Morena's efficiency is applied with a surgical precision that touches the soul, to passing reforms that concentrate power, that weaken checks and balances, and that allow them to keep doing what they've been doing, governing for themselves with everyone's money. And to pull it off, what better than a spectacle fit for the cheapest show on broadcast TV? Two representatives nearly fought in Congress, while their colleagues, acting as if making history, raised their hands to approve what they were told. And since we're talking about Señas and Escobar, it's worth dedicating a few lines to him, because this man is not just any legislator, he's the kind of character that only Mexico can produce, with that generosity that defines us when it comes to creating unbelievable politicians. What a name! It already sounds like something out of a XXX science fiction movie, and he has a political career that backs him up as a trusted man of the system. Former stripper, former official in Veracruz, former a lot of things. And now also the protagonist of a legislative brawl that is already part of the audio-visual collection of national shame. And what about Carlos Mancilla? At least has the merit of having participated in an event that inadvertently did Mexico the favor of distracting attention from the real Chavez, the one with the reforms being approved at that moment. because that's what needs to be understood. While you were watching the video of the deputies fighting, while you were sharing it on WhatsApp, while you were saying how shameful it was, how low they had sunk, someone in San Lazaro was saying approved to something that will most likely affect your life in ways you can't even imagine yet. That is Mexican politics at its finest, the art of doing whatever they want, while everyone else looks the other way. And with this, I'm not saying that Mancilla did it on purpose, but by playing along with the drunk, he did help distract attention from what was truly important. Maybe consciously, maybe not. We won't know that. Let's be clear about something that a lot of people still don't want to see. Maybe because reality is just too uncomfortable. Mexico's Congress, in its current form, is not an independent branch of government. It's an instrument. It's the legislative extension of the executive. It's the presidency's notary office. Debate. What debate? In Morena, there's no debate, only obedience. The legislators of that party are not representatives of the people in the sense that the Constitution sets out. They are employees of the party. They are operatives who go to San Lazaro to do what they are told to do, to vote the way they are told to vote, and in exceptional cases, to stage barroom brawls that serve as conventional distractions. When Sheinbaum needs a reform, the reform gets approved. It doesn't matter if there's a real or inflated quorum. It doesn't matter if opposition legislators make a show of outrage. Whether citizens agree or not doesn't matter, since that's the government's propaganda machine's purpose. To convince those who can still be convinced that everything the Fourth Transformation does is for the good of the people, even if the people are worse off every day. And Congress Mexico, its uncomfortable configuration. Reality is follow the best tradition of authoritarian caracteriza la mejor tradición of the people. We come to the next chapter. The story that makes the Fourth Transformation most uncomfortable and that nobody in their paid-off media wants to tell. And it's the most important, the most explosive, and curiously, the one that has received the least coverage in the media that live off government favors. And that's no coincidence. When a topic genuinely makes those in power uncomfortable, those in power have two options: attack the messenger or ignore the message. In this case, they have chosen both with the efficiency that characterizes them. This is much juicier than any fight between congressmen. This is potentially the thread that connects Morena's political elite with organized crime through one of the most sophisticated theft schemes that have been documented in the country's recent history. And the thread, if they keep pulling it patiently, inevitably leads, like everything that smells of corruption in this country since the arrival of the Fourth Transformation, to the circle of Andrés Manuel López Beltrán. Yes, the welfare blob, the political heir, the one some already saw as the next anointed candidate in the dynastic chain of the Fourth Transformation. Icon Midstream is not a company that appears in the headlines of nightly news. It doesn't have the media profile of a drug cartel outfit with hitmen and trucks. It has a much more discreet, much more subtle, and much more dangerous profile as an energy company operating in the midstream sector. That is, the transportation, storage, and processing of hydrocarbons. And why does it matter? Because in the investigation behind the Icon Midstream case, a map of connections begins to emerge that, according to those who have followed the thread with journalistic rigor, links the operations of that company to money laundering structures connected to organized crime. And those structures, in turn, reach into the political circles of figures who are not exactly unknown in Mexico's recent history. And one of those figures, according to the investigations that have been coming to light, has the last name López Beltrán. Mexico's political history follows a pattern that repeats as reliably as the seasons. And it's this: every time there's an intersection between the energy sector, political power, and organized crime, money flows in directions that don't match what the official documents say. What really happened? What happened was that the Fourth Transformation, like every revolution that comes to power with the discourse of moral purity, discovered that the state has many dark spaces where plenty of hands can reach in. And some of those hands, apparently, have last names that will sound familiar to you. You'll remember that the week started with the bombshell news. Manuel López Beltrán, known in the underworld as Andy, the welfare kid, stuffed pepper nose, or the slow brother, suddenly stepped down from Morena's organization's secretariat. And I say suddenly because if you believe in coincidences, you're far from seeing the wickedness with which these criminals operate. There was no planning, no ceremony, no proper handover as it should be. And I'm leaving overnight with the laughable excuse of going to seek a seat in Mexico's Federal Chamber of Deputies. Let's put our cards on the table. A seat in the Chamber of Deputies? Immunity? Did anyone tell him you only get immunity after winning an election and being sworn in are months ahead of us? More than a year, to be exact. Events where our dear Andy will be more exposed than an exotic dancer. If it's not about immunity, then why the urgency to run away from the Morena leadership right before the elections in Coahuila? This isn't a scheduling problem. It's a matter of survival. While in the National Palace, they were trying to sell us the idea that everything was under control, in the real world, the files were piling up. The investigation into Icon Midstream in Houston isn't just hallway gossip. It's a network of fuel tax fraud that points directly to the heart of the Morena structure. Computers, servers, and a large amount of information that is already in the hands of international authorities. As the reports rightly point out, the common thread that connects the political class with organized crime is precisely fuel tax fraud. And guess who appears in all the intelligence flowcharts? Exactly, the family of the Macuspano donkey. If you want to understand where the fire is, don't watch the morning press briefings. Look at the operations map. It's a puzzle where the central piece, that name that echoes in every geographic location mentioned, is Andy. The Americans aren't playing around. They already put the gun on the table several months ago. The demand to hand over the narco politicians involved is a reality that can no longer be hidden behind speeches about sovereignty. Ironically, the Prince of the Fourth Transformation became the architect of his own political downfall. Not only did he make an enemy of the current presidency and fracture his own party, but he also showed a complete lack of operational ability. He promised not to steal, not to lie, and not to betray, but reality shows us that he fulfilled the Morena motto in reverse. He did all three things perfectly. Just imagine the scene. The old man with piss-stained legs dreaming of shielding his movement by controlling the Supreme Court and the prosecutor's office. Meanwhile, his own son, the one who was supposed to be the heir, has become the biggest burden and potentially the executioner of the supposed legacy he built. It's like Shakespeare, but without the dramatic talent. Pure cynicism, plain and simple. So, dear cultured and knowledgeable audience, don't be fooled by the theatrics in the Chamber of Deputies. Andy isn't looking for a legislative seat. He's looking for an emergency exit before the legal vice tightens. History teaches us that when empires fall, the first to flee are those who thought themselves untouchable. Now that you have the points of this story in front of you, allow me to show you the thread that connects them. They aren't separate stories, they're parts of the same story. In Congress, Sheinbaum's reforms are approved amid the scandal of a brawl among lawmakers. The legislative circus works as a smokescreen for an agenda that concentrates power and weakens the institutions that could investigate. The fuel tax fraud, the investigation into Icon Midstream, and the thread that leads to López Beltrán's circle make up the mechanism that explains why there is impunity. Why does Congress approve whatever it is asked to approve? And why do those accused request leave instead of facing investigation? Because the system is designed to protect its own. Money from organized crime, laundered through sophisticated corporate structures, finances politics. Politics, in turn, produces legislators and officials who protect those structures. And the circle closes, perfectly round, perfectly functional, perfectly invisible to anyone who doesn't bother to pull the thread. And journalism and justice and the autonomous bodies, there are those who will ask, but Berman, where is the prosecutor's office? Where are the autonomous bodies that should be investigating all this? Good questions. Let's take it step by step. Critical journalism exists in Mexico. There are brave, rigorous journalists and communicators who investigate based on documented information and publish what they find. Given the risk that entails in a country that for years has ranked among the most dangerous in the world for practicing journalism, the problem is that those journalists and communicators, I include myself among them, work for media outlets with limited audiences. Meanwhile, the government's media apparatus, the paid-off newscasts, the paid influencers, the party-line journalists have access to massive audiences and the official advertising budget, which works as the most effective control mechanism that exists for the press. The Attorney General's office, under the leadership of its current head, has shown an extraordinary ability to investigate the regime's enemies and an equally extraordinary ability to ignore what it doesn't want to see. Independent agencies, those that in theory should serve as an institutional counterbalance to the power of the executive, have been subjected to a systematic process of weakening that began with the previous government and continues with the current one. When the referees are weakened, the one with the most power always wins. And that's how a system of impunity is maintained, not with a grand decree, not with an explicit law that says the powerful are not to be investigated. It is maintained by the sum of 1,000 small decisions. A prosecutor who doesn't move the investigation forward, a legislator who blocks a hearing, a media outlet that ignores the report, an autonomous agency that doesn't have the authority for the specific case. The architecture of impunity is invisible precisely because it is built with pieces that, when seen separately, seem normal. Let's finish with what matters, not with the circus of lawmakers fighting each other, although that does show the level of our legislature. Not with the specific name of icon, Midstream, or López Beltrán. What matters is the pattern. What matters is recognizing that these stories, seemingly different, are symptoms of the same problem. A political system in which organized crime and institutional power share spaces, share money, share interests, and eventually share the same agenda. A system in which Congress passes reforms that concentrate power in the executive, eliminating the checks and balances that could at some point ask the uncomfortable questions. A system in which allegations of corruption or ties to crime do not trigger investigations, but rather communication strategies. A system in which dirty money is laundered through sophisticated corporate structures, finances politics, and the circle closes in on itself. That's what's behind the barroom show in San Lázaro. That's what's behind the icon Midstream case and the thread that leads to López Beltrán's circle. It's not an isolated scandal. It's the system working exactly as it was designed to work. And while we, the citizens, get distracted by the fight between the deputies, by the statements of the inept press, by the hashtag wars on social media, by the memes of politicians saying absurd things, the system keeps operating. Calm, efficient, invisible. The only way to change it is exactly what you are doing right now, getting informed, understanding, thinking critically, not swallowing the story that we are the good guys, exercise once every 6 years at the polls, and the rest of the time you can just relax. Not accepting that normalizing a scandal is the same as resolving it. Mexico is an extraordinary country with extraordinary people who deserve extraordinary institutions. It doesn't have them yet, but as long as there are citizens who demand accountability, who ask uncomfortable questions, who don't let themselves be distracted by the circus, there is hope. I hope this has given you tools to understand what is happening in our Mexico, which has so much potential and so little luck in choosing those who govern it. Remember, indifference is the oxygen of corruption. As long as citizens look the other way, the system breathes easy. So don't look the other way. Ask the questions, demand the answers, share the information. I leave you with this. One who doesn't know is like one who can't see. One who refuses to know is like one who won't see. And one who knows but stays silent is an accomplice. I am Luis Berman. I'll read your comments. See you on Monday. Remember that you can make your donations via PayPal. You can find the information in the comment section and press the bell to receive notifications every time there's new content. Remember that you can make your donations via PayPal. You can find the information in the comments section. Thanks to you, this channel stays active. It's very important to subscribe, like, and press the bell to receive notifications every time there's new content. Thank you.